Hi guys. Well, I'm here by myself. Nobody made it to class today. I know you guys both have a lot going on, but this is our final class before the final, which is going to be next week. So I am going to just kind of go through some of these slides real quick and then make it available to you and email it to you. And if you choose to listen to it, great. If you don't, you can study on your own. Just kind of read off of these slides. And then I'm going to tell you, well, I'll just tell you right now, the things that I did to help you get ready for your final. So I have a game. It's actually a GimKit, which is similar to a Kahoot, which has some study questions in it. So it's basically just if you're all here, you play against each other. On your own, it's going to be more like a game of solitaire kind of thing. So I'm going to try to send you a link for that. I'll try to make it like homework. So it won't be graded per se, but it will go through some of those questions in like a flashcard kind of way. And that will help prepare you for the final. I did not see any papers in the turned in this week either. So all of you would owe me that final paper, which is in the personality chapter, which was the last module, so module 8, I think it was. So make sure that you turn that in and maybe shoot me a text or something and tell me it's in there so I can get that graded. And then next week we'll have that final. So pretty much the whole class is dedicated to the final. In addition, I emailed each of you earlier today some short answer questions. Those are going to be the questions that we're going to do on the test. So you can fill those out and send them back to me. You don't have to do it the day of testing. You can send it to me early. You can send it to me separate. You can just email it to me, whatever you want to do to get those done. They're not really something you can cheat on. They're more like, give me an example of classical conditioning in your life, or I think I used operant conditioning in your life. So you need to be familiar with what operant conditioning is and then find an example that fits. What are the 3 stages of memory, and how would you see them work? You know, that kind of thing. So these are all going to be kind of examples, that plus the final. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and open up this week's quiz. But if you guys are both out right now, now is not right the time to open it. If you guys just shoot me an email or a text and let me know when you need me to open it, I'll get that open for you guys. Or you can take it on top of the final next week. It's just a lot. I don't want to overwhelm you. So we can get that last quiz in for you as well. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because it's screencast-o-matic and I only have so many minutes, so I'll have to do a couple of these, but I'll try to get through it pretty quickly for you. What we're looking at in the final chapters, I'm not going to go for it word for word, it's a little quicker with no people, is psychological disorders, and then we'll be looking in chapter 16 of treatment modalities that we can use. So basically, when we look at psychological disorders, we're looking at a disturbance in emotional behavior, usually has a dysfunction in biological developmental process, and the client is in distress, or they are creating deviant thoughts or behavior. And so something's happening for them that makes it so that they are not functioning well and they need some assistance with that. But we have very clear parameters. Like, so you can just say, oh, they're bipolar, oh, they're depressed. But we have clear definitions of symptomology that is attached to that. And that comes from the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So that is the book that we have to use and make sure that they meet that criteria for every diagnosis. There's a ton of diagnoses. It's a huge book, and we break those categories down into more specific things. However, for the purposes of this course, we're only going over some of the big categories. So we're just going to look at those briefly. You can see here the amount of mental health disorders, and these are actually a little higher now post-COVID, as we see people more likely are more willing to accept and move towards treatment. But at any given time, up to 1 in 5 people will be suffering from a diagnosable mental health condition. That doesn't mean they'll have it for their lifetime. It just means at that time that they're suffering from that. So it can be anxiety, depression are the big ones that are most common, but we see other things like schizophrenia, and certainly personality disorders. So again, I'm going through these fairly quickly because you can read them at home. They're telling me what to do now. Whatever you want to do would be great. So we'll do this. So I was looking for some guidance because I have no student in Savannah either, so I'm kind of on my own. So briefly, So neurological, neurodevelopmental disorders that we see, a big one that we see very commonly, mostly in children, but we definitely see it in adults, is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or there is attention deficit disorder without hyperactivity. And this is where the client may have trouble focusing on things. They may have trouble sitting still. They may have trouble with impulsivity. So just easy to not think through what's going to happen to them as something of consequences of what they're doing. Another one that we see is ASD, or the autism spectrum disorder. Here, they talk about a spectrum because that's essentially what it is. There's varying degrees of severity, just like there's varying degrees of severity of other things like depression and anxiety. So some of this is normal. Depression, anxiety is normal under certain conditions. It would be normal to have that experience. It would not be normal to not be able to recover from it or for it to be severe. And ASD is different than that. It is something that would not be normal. It's actually characterized by a severe language and social impairment, and often has some repetitive behaviors and some inward focus. They have trouble commonly with social disorders. They have trouble attaching to other people, picking up on social clues, kind of going with the flow. This kind of awkwardness can be very difficult for them sometimes. And sometimes it's common for them to have comorbid things such as attention deficit alongside it, so it can make it extra difficult for them in some settings. So for them to learn those social clues and things like that, it can just be a lot more challenging for them. We don't have an answer to either one of these neurodevelopmental disorders as to what absolutely causes them. We're looking into continuing to do research and some things like that, trying to find out what might be the cause. There are some links in different areas. Some people talk about, there were some links of car seats and heads jerking. There's links of mothers' prenatal care being anxious, creating ADHD. If we knew for sure, we would tell you. We just don't know sure. We just know that some studies show some positive correlation. Another positive correlation is smoking for attention deficit for the mother prenatal. For ASD, they're seeing some things here again, maybe in the carrying of the womb with inflammation from the mother or a low vitamin D. Again, we're just seeing some connections here. We're not able to say this is the cause. We know what it's not. So it's not immunizations and things like that. That sometimes those went out there and those were some thoughts. We know sugar does not cause hyperactivity. That was out there. We know red dye does not cause, it may cause hyperactivity, but it doesn't cause attention deficit hyperactivity. So they may just be hyper because they're hyped up. Usually when we have sugar, it's an exciting event too. So those are the things we know and don't know. And again, if we had a concrete answer, I would surely tell you. I'd also be very rich. So, couple diagnoses. We're going to look at the big categories for this course. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. And again, we'll have to do a couple slides. Schizophrenia is a big one. This one is often misunderstood. Schizophrenia has many different types of schizophrenia underneath it. They may look a little different, from paranoid to catatonic and things like that. And they all look a little bit different, but they are considered psychotic disorder because it's a disruption of the thought and the perceptions of the person. So their reality may be different. They may perceive their reality to be different than it really is. They are often it may suffer from positive or negative symptoms. So that means that they may either have a positive symptom such as hallucinations or delusions, or they may have negative symptoms, which means they're just not able to adjust to society. So they may not be seeing things that they should be doing. They're not able to kind of work or take care of their ADLs or things like that can happen. So they do have, again, there's a very clear diagnosis criteria there. You can see here they have to have at least 2 of the following for at least a month, including delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, not being able to speak. So a whole variety of things that they would be suffering from. So this is different than like a psychotic episode induced by drugs or something like that. That would not be schizophrenia. This is in and of itself. It's often, we do see genetic markers and within certain families, and it does reoccur. So we have active phases when they may have phases where they're less active. Usually occurs in young adulthood when we start to see the first symptomology really come out. And I already shared positive symptoms are going to be hallucinations and delusions. And then cognition. They can't think clearly. They don't think the same way as we do. They may not be able to speak. You hear the word salad. This is where they're talking, but they're not making sense. They're saying words, but the words don't come together correctly, or they just simply don't make sense. Let's see here. The origins of schizophrenia, again, we just don't know for sure, absolutely. Unfortunately, in the mental health disorders, it's not like a COVID test where you can just take a test and it says that absolutely this is that. But we do know that there does appear to be some genetic linkage, and it does seem that there are some genes that are tagged that are involved in schizophrenia in certain family lines. We know that the best treatment for schizophrenia is medication, although it may be coupled with therapy to help them cope with their disorder. There's some neurotransmitter malfunctions going on there. Depressive disorders, on the other hand, are very common. In fact, the most common diagnosis that we'll see, at least in the United States, followed by closely behind by anxiety. Depressive disorders, again, there are many that kind of fall underneath that grouping, but major depressive disorders typically would include things like feelings of worthlessness, lack of hope, lack of energy, unable to attend to things that you would normally be attending to. A major depressive episode would be an episode that creates this, where dysthymic would kind of always be running it a little lower. We have your bipolars and things like that. But this course doesn't require we go into detail with all of them. Just know that these depressive disorders have this low feeling that comes that the client's not able to resolve on their own. Different models, again, often combination of treatments, including counseling and medication is also an option for many with depression. About 30% of the people will not respond to medication for depression, but for many they will, and that coupled with some other things can help. You also want to look carefully at making sure you have a medical review and make sure you don't have anything else that's triggering that. Things like low vitamin D, thyroid disorders, a lot of different disorders can create that sense of depression as well. Those can be resolved medically. Biological link, there does seem to be a biological link. We do see heredity lines where families have more depressive disorders that seem to be passed along amongst them. Bipolar, it falls under this category as well. I'm watching my clock. It's going to stop me at 15 and I'll have to do another one. But bipolar disorder does have these major depressive loops, but it also has these manic episodes that come with it. But hopefully to help you understand that, it does not mean it's depressed, manic, depressed, manic, depressed, manic. It could mean that, but sometimes it doesn't mean that. It could be depressed, 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 manic, or several manic and then a depressed. So it doesn't have to be in order, and the time frame in which they're in those funks can be different. It can be days to weeks. So for every person, how they go through that would be different. Here again, medication is the best go-to treatment. However, counseling definitely helps, and particularly helping them to deal with their condition and the results of some of the things that may be happening to them while they go through that. I'll see if I can get through anxiety before 15. Anxiety disorders, I told you, also very common. Bipolar is not as common as these other two, but it's certainly not uncommon like some of the disorders. But anxiety is very common. They have a lot of categories underneath them. The big ones that your book is kind of highlighting is GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, which is sort of like depression, but anxious, but it's an overall sense. I'm feeling this way all the time. I wake up feeling anxious. Every day I feel anxious. I feel like it's overwhelming and it's kind of taking over my life, and it's lasting for at least 6 months. It's not going away. Where panic disorders tend to be very specific. It feels like they're having a heart attack, but they may not feel that way all the time. And then you have your phobias that fall into here. There's going to be a fear of something, fear of spiders, fear of snakes, fear of whatever that is that you're afraid of. My daughter's afraid of clowns. And then social anxiety disorder, and this is more becoming more phobic around people or being on stage, public speaking, those kind of things. And it can be debilitating for them when they go through something like that. Agoraphobia is a fear to leave the home because you feel like something bad is going to happen if you do that. So the specific phobias are fairly common. Again, here it does look, in many cases, medication can offer relief both for panic attacks to slow everything down, but there are some low-grade medications to just kind of help you to not get so anxious. It just really kind of helps the body just to maintain and control. Not necessarily something you have to take forever, but for some people it might be. It may just be for a period while they're going through a difficult time. I'm going to stop there because I'm going to clock out here, and then I'm going to bring it back and we'll start with OCD.